A growing number of commentators and experts assume that it is highly probable that this was a premeditated operation by the Russian KGB. This so-called honey trap set for the elites of the Western world, primarily the United States. This can only mean that they also possess compromising material against many leaders still active today.
Tonight, the Epstein files have been pulled into a new fight that is not really about evidence, but about narrative control. According to public reporting, Poland's Prime Minister Donald Tusk said Poland would probe possible links between Jeffrey Epstein and Russia, and the Kremlin dismissed the suggestion as unworthy of serious comment. The denial did not shrink the story. It widened it into an intelligence-flavored storm where insinuation travels faster than proof. In Trump's political universe, that kind of detour is not a side plot. It is a survival reflex, and it carries a cost. According to public reporting, the new Russia thread entered the Epstein story through public remarks in Europe and an immediate Kremlin rejection, not through a court finding or a released intelligence assessment. That distinction matters because it exposes the temptation at the center of Trump's posture. When Trump is pinned by a damaging narrative, his instinct is to change the arena. He does it by widening the frame until the original facts become one element inside a larger, noisier argument. Here, the widened frame is geopolitics and espionage. It offers the illusion of scale, and scale can feel like escape. But the move is a miscalculation. Espionage claims are not softer than scandal. They are harder. They trigger higher evidentiary expectations and faster institutional pushback. Reuters reported that Tusk spoke of investigating possible links, while the Kremlin dismissed the idea as unserious and framed it as a distraction from Western scandals. That response is not an end to the story, it is an accelerant. When a government spokesperson calls a claim a diversion, the media ecosystem pivots from the claim itself to the motives behind the claim, and the motive discussion becomes a second headline that outlives the first. In Trump's world, that is dangerous because institutions do not argue on vibes. They argue on records. Newsrooms demand documents. Lawyers demand provenance. Officials demand chain of custody and clear jurisdiction before they attach their names to a conclusion. If none of that exists, the story does not die. It mutates into a debate about who is manipulating the public, and Trump's brand of pressure politics is always the first suspect. This is where Trump's leverage shrinks. The American system is built to resist conclusions without a record. If there is no court filing, no official document, no signed finding, then the claim cannot be settled, only recycled. The result is a looping cycle that keeps Epstein in the center while adding Russia as a multiplier. That is not narrative control. That is narrative inflation, and inflation eventually turns on the person trying to spend it. From this point forward, every attempt to steer the spotlight away from Trump makes the spotlight wider and harder to escape. The second layer of Trump's posture is procedural avoidance. If a scandal is anchored in documents, testimony, and a trail of names, then the safest play is to move the public conversation into a space where proof is difficult and time horizons are long. Intelligence narratives do that. They turn hard questions into soft fog. They also invite an enemy image that can be used to explain away institutional scrutiny. In this case, the enemy image is Russia. According to public reporting, Tusk said Poland would launch a probe into possible links between Epstein and Russia. That is a real political action, but it is also a narrow one. An investigation is not a conclusion. Reuters also reported that speculation has linked Epstein to other intelligence services as well, and that no conclusive proof has been produced by any major outlet confirming affiliation with any intelligence agency. That single line is the wall Trump runs into. If the record cannot carry the claim becomes a credibility test for the person amplifying it. Trump's blind spot is that he treats attention as something he can redirect with force. Yet the modern information system is built on competing validators. When a claim touches espionage, the validators multiply. National security reporters, foreign desks, fact-checkers, former officials, and legal analysts all converge, not to confirm, but to demand standards. Sky News, for example, framed the Putin references in the latest files as not implying wrongdoing and noted the absence of evidence that Putin and Epstein ever met. That kind of framing is institutional resistance in plain language. It tells the audience that the story cannot be upgraded from mention to meaning without more. That resistance has a second effect. It forces Trump into the weakest position for a pressure politician, the position of qualifying his own insinuations. If he pushes harder, he is accused of smearing without proof. If he retreats, he looks like he floated a distraction and got caught. If he tries to outsource the claim to foreign voices, the system still demands the same thing: documents, dates, and corroboration. And once the Kremlin dismisses the idea publicly, the denial itself becomes a reusable talking point in diplomatic and media exchanges because it allows Moscow to posture as the party rejecting speculation, while Western politics argues inside the smoke. At the same time, disinformation contamination becomes a predictable hazard. Ukrinform reported that propagandists fabricated a letter and doctored media videos tied to Epstein files narratives to discredit Ukraine. Even if a viewer debates the messenger, the mechanism is familiar and mechanical. Once a high-interest document trove becomes a political weapon, fake artifacts appear, and every genuine reference becomes harder to separate from a planted one. That environment punishes Trump because he relies on speed, and speed is the enemy of verification. The consequence is destabilizing. Instead of escaping the Epstein gravity, Trump's orbit invites a second scrutiny layer, not only what the files contain, but how his side is using them. That adds institutional friction, because the press and political opponents can frame the pivot as manipulation, and institutions tend to tighten when they sense manipulation under public scrutiny. Trump's remaining options narrow as the system shifts from debating a scandal to auditing the narrative tactics used to survive it. This is where the detour becomes the trap. According to public reporting, the Kremlin's spokesman Dmitry Peskov dismissed the suggestion that Epstein was linked to Russian intelligence as not worth serious comment, and Reuters noted that speculation has circulated about other intelligence services as well, without conclusive proof. Those two facts create a structural dead end for anyone trying to use the Russia angle as an exit route. Once the public hears a claim and an official denial side by side, the story stops being about the claim. It becomes a contest over credibility, and credibility is an institutional battlefield where Trump is routinely outmatched. Here is the miscalculation at the center of Trump's decision-making. Trump treats scandal as a volume problem. He believes that if he can raise the volume of an alternate frame, the original frame will be drowned out. But intelligence narratives do not drown anything. They multiply attention. They add actors, governments, and foreign policy implications. And every added actor brings its own press corps, its own standards, and its own incentives. In practice, that means the Epstein story does not leave Trump. It acquires a second engine that keeps it alive. The institutional resistance begins with language, and language is law's quiet cousin. Reuters did not say Epstein was an intelligence asset. Reuters said Tusk suggested it and that Poland would probe. Reuters added that no conclusive proof has emerged. Those phrases are not cosmetic. They are containment. They prevent a rumor from becoming an established record. They also trap Trump's posture inside a narrowing corridor. If Trump's ecosystem amplifies the Russia frame, institutions answer with the same containment language, and every repetition of containment is a public reminder that the claim remains unproven. Sky News added a second layer of constraint by warning that the appearance of Putin's name in the material does not imply wrongdoing, and by noting there is no evidence the two men ever met. Again, this is not a political rebuttal. It is an evidentiary break. It tells audiences that mention is not a meeting, and repetition is not a relationship. The break matters because Trump's politics depends on insinuation doing the work of proof. When the break is applied, the insinuation looks like a tactic. At this stage, the Russia angle starts to function less as an accusation and more as a mirror. It reflects Trump's vulnerability. According to public reporting, the Kremlin framed the allegations as a distraction from Western scandals involving powerful figures. That framing is potent because it hands Trump a poisoned gift. If he leans into it, he appears to validate Moscow's claim that the point is distraction. If he rejects it, he has to explain why the story was widened in the first place. Either way, he is reactive. Now, add the contamination problem. Ukrinform reported that propagandists fabricated a letter and doctored media videos to push fake claims tied to Epstein files narratives. The key consequence is not limited to Ukraine. It is systemic. In an environment where fake artifacts are circulating, the burden of proof rises for everyone. Journalists slow down, editors add qualifiers, lawyers warn about defamation, officials refuse to speculate. Trump's model collapses under that weight because his advantage has always been speed and certainty, not documentation. This is the point where the detour turns into a liability cascade. First, the story becomes international. That invites foreign leaders to posture, and posturing creates more headlines. Second, the story becomes security adjacent. That invites commentators and former officials to speak in conditional language, which again highlights uncertainty. Third, the story becomes a referendum on media literacy and manipulation. That invites fact-checking, which is inherently adversarial to Trump's preferred style. Trump also faces a legal and institutional mismatch. Intelligence claims are not adjudicated on cable news. They are handled through classified channels, formal investigations, and cautious public statements. If no official document emerges, there is nothing to win. If an official document does emerge, it will be interpreted by institutions that Trump does not control. Either route strips him of leverage. The smartest move would be to avoid the claim entirely and focus on verifiable, bounded facts. But that is not how Trump survives pressure. He survives by escalating. Escalation here has a predictable consequence. When Trump escalates without a record, his opponents do not need to prove the underlying Russia claim false. They only need to prove his reckless behavior. They point to the absence of conclusive proof, the presence of qualifiers in major reporting, and the documented existence of fabricated artifacts in the surrounding information ecosystem. Then they present Trump as a leader willing to contaminate the public sphere to protect himself. That is not a rhetorical flourish. It is a prosecutable political argument because it translates into calls for oversight, hearings, and institutional guardrails. And that is the climax. Trump's detour invites the very thing he is trying to escape: institutional constraint. The more the Russia angle is used as a shield, the more it draws attention to what is missing: proof. The more attention is drawn to what is missing, the more Trump is forced into a defensive posture. He can demand loyalty from his allies, but he cannot demand that courts, major newsrooms, and foreign governments adopt his preferred narrative grammar. According to Reuters, the released Epstein material mentions Russia multiple times and references Russian women, including one whom Epstein allegedly tried to introduce to Prince Andrew. Those details are tangible, but they still do not establish espionage. They establish something else: shareable fragments that can be clipped and misread as proof. In Trump's ecosystem, fragments become leverage. A mention becomes a hint becomes a headline, and the headline becomes a weapon. Institutions answer with tighter language, and each qualifier becomes a public reminder that the claim remains unproven. Trump cannot ride that frame for a day and move on, because every new repost invites a new round of demands for evidence. Time then turns adversarial. Formal probes move at the pace of files and jurisdiction. Trump moves at the pace of outrage. When those tempos collide, he looks impatient and ungrounded. And impatience signals that the goal is pressure relief, not truth-finding. By the time this cycle matures, Trump is not steering the story. He is being steered by it, and the track narrows with every day that passes without decisive evidence. After the climax, the damage does not resolve. It settles into institutions. Trump's posture, again, is to treat the Russia frame as an umbrella that can cover the Epstein storm, because an umbrella changes the subject from personal accountability to national rivalry. The blind spot is that umbrellas also attract lightning. Once the story is cast as intelligence adjacent, every institution that cares about credibility becomes cautious, and caution is the opposite of the quick pivot Trump needs. According to public reporting, the Kremlin dismissal framed the speculation as a distraction from Western scandals involving powerful people. That framing gives foreign actors a role inside a domestic American drama, and it makes Trump's narrative management look internationally legible. He is no longer only a politician defending himself. He is a politician whose survival strategy can be described by an adversary on the world stage. In a credibility contest, that is catastrophic, because it allows critics to argue that Trump's moves are predictable and therefore manipulable. The institutional resistance also hardens through verification culture. Sky News emphasized that Putin's name appearing in files does not imply wrongdoing and that there is no evidence he and Epstein met. Reuters emphasized that no conclusive proof has emerged of Epstein being an intelligence asset. Those breaks shape what responsible outlets will repeat and what they will not. Trump can pressure allies, but he cannot rewrite those newsroom standards, and he cannot force official documents to appear on command. Meanwhile, the information environment becomes more brittle. Ukrinform reported fabricated letters and doctored videos tied to Epstein files narratives. In a brittle environment, institutions respond by narrowing what is acceptable to say, because mistakes are expensive. That narrowing hurts Trump because his strategy depends on expansive insinuation and maximal interpretation. There is also a strategic consequence that Trump cannot control. Once a U.S. political story is framed around Russia, every existing Russia dispute becomes a lens for interpretation. Allies and rivals read the same headlines differently, and those readings feed back into U.S. politics. Reuters reported that Tusk's government was considering a probe, which means the story now has a procedural timeline outside Trump's reach. Investigative steps, even small ones, create periodic news pegs. Each peg reopens the cycle, and each reopening drags the original Epstein subject back to the center. Trump's instinct is to treat that cycle as a stage for dominance. He tries to project certainty, to make the audience choose between his confidence and an institution's caution. But caution wins in the long run because it is self-protective. Editors avoid legal exposure. Officials avoid unverified claims. Governments avoid endorsing speculation. Trump can shout over that caution for a day, but he cannot repeal it. The result is a steady leak of authority. The louder he becomes, the more the public is reminded that the record is not there. In that leak, opponents gain an easy frame. Trump is not guiding the facts, he is chasing the optics, and the institutions are dragging him back. Trump is left with fewer moves that do not backfire. If his camp keeps pushing the Russia frame, it increases the impression of deflection. If it backs away, it concedes that the detour failed. If it attacks the press for qualifying claims, it validates the premise that the claims are not supported. The system closes around that paradox, and Trump's room to maneuver contracts further. In the end, the Russia detour does not rescue Trump. It boxes him in. According to public reporting, Reuters described how the Kremlin dismissed the Epstein intelligence speculation as unproven, and how Poland's prime minister said his government would investigate possible links. Those two signals create a public wedge that Trump cannot close. A foreign leader can announce a probe. Moscow can deny it. Neither action produces the one thing Trump needs in order to win a narrative fight, a verifiable record that ends debate. So the posture becomes self-defeating. If Trump's ecosystem keeps pointing at Russia, institutions respond with qualifiers and demands for evidence. Sky News, in its analysis of the files, stressed that the appearance of Putin's name does not imply wrongdoing and noted there is no evidence Putin and Epstein ever met. That kind of language does not clear anyone. It freezes the story in a state of unresolved suspicion, and unresolved suspicion is the soil where scandal grows. Meanwhile, the contamination risk keeps rising. Ukrinform reported fabricated letters and doctored videos circulating around Epstein files narratives. In a contaminated environment, the loudest voice is not the most credible voice, and Trump's advantage fades as the system shifts toward verification and restraint. That leaves Trump with narrowing options and diminishing leverage. He can escalate and look reckless. He can retreat and look exposed. He can attack institutions and look cornered. The detour that was meant to redirect attention ends up extending the damage because it adds a second controversy that cannot be resolved on Trump's timetable. If you want more fact-locked analysis like this, subscribe for the next briefing.